Hello, my friends, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being with me again today. The Czechs organized a rally against their warmonger government. That's the title of this article that I have, coming obviously from the evil Russians. But the fact is that some Czechs protested against their government, requiring or requesting that they would stop aiding Ukraine and or supporting the war in Ukraine on this side and stop the war and all that. Now let's see the details of this little rally that occurred in Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic. So this article, as I said, comes from Russia Today from April 17th, 2023. Czechs rally against, and I'm quoting, warmonger government. Thousands gathered in Prague to demand the authorities turn attention away from helping Ukraine and towards facing problems at home. That's exactly what the Russian government expected and been waiting probably in October, November last year to happen, and December definitely. But it didn't happen supposedly because it was a very warm summer in Europe, therefore they didn't have to use too much energy, so therefore they didn't run out of energy to heat their houses. That was one interpretation of this, but there's many more angles to look at the issue. Thousands protested in downtown Prague on Sunday, arguing that the Czech government is devoting too much resources to helping Ukraine fight Russia rather than tackling the energy crisis and high inflation at home. Many called on Prime Minister Petr Fiala to resign. The Czechia Agency Poverty rally was spearheaded by the opposition party Law Respect Expertise, Pro 2022. Protesters gathered at Wenceslas Square, condemning what one called, and I'm quoting, the lying government, and carrying banners that said, and I'm quoting, no to war, and again I'm quoting, get out of NATO, end quote. Now I don't know, you see, these things, when you hear they use someone condemning what one called the lying government, if you work in that kind of business, I don't know what kind of, unless you have it on camera. Addressing the crowd, Jaroslav Foldina, an MP from the Freedom and Direct Democracy Party, said that, and I'm quoting, the government needs to go before it destroys the country, end quote. A protester named Renata Urbanova told Agence France Presse that the government is, and I'm quoting, full of warmongers who are making us suffer economically. A group of people with Ukrainian flags rallied in support of Kiev in the center of the capital at around the same time. Members of opposing camps shouted at each other but were ultimately separated by police. A similar anti-government demonstration was held last month. More than a dozen people were arrested and scuffles with police broke out at that event. The monthly cost of living has increased for most Czechs, and up to 70% of households were forced to resort to austerity measures, according to a survey released by pollster Median in January. At the same time, Prague has supplied heavy weapons to Ukraine, including 89 tanks, and has backed economic sanctions imposed on Russia by the EU. More than 460,000 Ukrainian refugees arrived in the Czech Republic after February 2022, and around 300,000 of them are still in the country, according to Euronews. Last year, the Czech parliament adopted a law aimed at providing assistance to refugees, which was recently extended until April 2024. That means these people, that are about 300 remaining over there, receive money from the Czech taxpayers in order to support Brussels and NATO, in this case United States, whatever, you know what I mean. So here it is. The Czechs are, some Czechs, because I'm not going to be like the Western mass media that says the Czechs are rallying against the government. Some Czechs, some don't. The same, oh, these guys are supporting this kind of rights. Some support, some not. Do you have an evidence? Okay, the evidence is this. Okay, you have a proportion. I don't like when you ask them about to give you a number. They say some, but rarely. They say the Americans support this policy. Not the Americans. Some Americans. How many are there? Are they a majority or a minority? Because it's a very important question. So every time when you hear or you read a headline like that, Americans support blah, 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 blah. What Americans? How many? Because if there's 3 Americans, we really don't care compared with 330 million, you know what I mean? But if it's, I don't know, about 80 million, well, you pay attention, okay? So the proportion matters decides how much attention you pay to the issue, obviously. The more care for it, the more important the issue is. The less care, the less important the issue, apparently. Why do I say apparently? Because the mass media can make a non-important issue the main issue that we all care about. And even if it's about a small minority of some members of the society, but they can make it the most important, and they make the majority bend over for the small minority because that's how the order is. Or they can make from something very important, you don't hear about it. Like for instance, let's say crossing the southern border. I haven't heard. I go every day on the news and I scroll down and I look and I don't see anything. It's like nothing happens there. Nothing happens at the southern border. Well, if you don't hear anything, that means nothing happens, correct? Well, if you know how the news are promoted and who picks what according to what other interest the news outlet have, then you realize that certain news they consider that are not important for us, and some news they consider should be important. This is called shaping public opinion. And then they have experts, analysts that are invited, and they tell us, they analyze an issue, like I do right here, and they tell you this and they tell you that, like I do right here. The problem is they are paid. Well, I'm not paid to do this. I'm not paid by the this, I'm not paid by the that, I'm not paid by the that. Okay? I personally try to, stay honest to finding what the hell happened and uncover things that these guys are pushing. For instance, they tell you that, I don't know, Russia did this and did that. Okay, well, let's find out. And you find evidence that it's not quite like that, and you wonder why. Well, because their interest. Well, I don't have that kind of problem. But anyway, you can be accused or whatever, but always bring evidence. And it's very easy to see that. I mean, you just have to pay attention. So in this case, the Czechs are, some Czechs are protesting, and nothing's going to happen. Because if it's not a major uprising, or how do you call it, protest, nothing is going to happen. Look in France. I mean, you can't compare these guys in Prague with a pension debacle that occurred in France. There were millions of people, if you gather all the protesters and so on, protesting almost every weekend. What did Macron and elected officials do? They ignored those guys. They ignored it. And here, if you have 3,000 people protesting something or supporting something, they say, oh, that's what it is. I remember when I was involved in some political something. I can't disclose too much, but it doesn't really matter. The thing was like this. I've been told, yes, Emil, but do something so I can use that. Like what? Well, do something so I can point out it's a problem. Oh, okay, all right. So sometimes when you see 300 people in front of a Capitol building, I don't know, in a state, demanding this kind of justice or that kind of justice, some of those things are very much used for some politicians to point out that there's the will of the people. People protest, and they use that as a springboard, to implement or push some legislation. The same, for instance, with the so-called gun control. All right, they use one incident, as awful as it is, to pass certain kind of things for the rest of us. that did not commit a crime, did not have any mental problems or issues or diagnostic or anything like that, but nevertheless, they do it for all of us, for those 300. That was an example, you understand. So, well, and imagine you have NGOs, imagine you have groups that are organizing this kind of things, let's say weekly, but they are the same people and the same number. And the politicians will use them, but they will not tell you, the mass media will not tell you, hey, it's the same guys all the time, it's the same 300 people. Like, for instance, you have now in the United Nations condemning the, they say, whatever, the arrest of the media in Russia. And they said a dozen of countries, or 2 dozens or some of countries. I have that article, I decided not to make it, to make a video on. Well, if you look over there, they're probably the same guys that are in Europe supporting, providing the same witnesses that you find. If commit a crime over here, you have these guys that say, no, he was with us, he didn't commit a crime. Always the same witnesses, plus minus a few, that it's advantageous for them at that time to be part of the witness. But look, if Russia does something, you're going to have the same guys blaming Russia, the same countries. Let's say 80% of European countries, Australia, Japan, and the ones that are about 50. Why? Because that's US's club, vassal club. That's it. And you're going to find plus minus a few islands here and there, and who knows what other country that needs some money and is promised. You're going to see. Just pay attention. You're going to see that. And it's not because they have a vision and they're the free countries and with the free people. Yeah. You want to see how free you are? Just say something that is, as a free person. And you're going to see how free you are. In a minute, you're going to be free. Not. But hey, what do I know? Just, try it. I mean, because you're told you're free to do this, you're free to do that. Yeah? Go through a checkpoint and see how free you are as a person without committing anything, without being, how should I put it, suspected of committing anything. See how free you are. Say, no, I don't want to be searched. I don't consent to any searches. Really? Okay, see how free you are. I didn't commit any crime. You don't have any evidence to conduct this search. And see if they're going to say, yes, sir, you're a free person. Please pass. Well, they're going to tell you this and that and this and that, and you're free. Anyway, if you really want to see something funny, not funny, but it's serious, just watch George Carlin, the comedian, deceased comedian, about your rights. Google it or do a search on YouTube and find about your rights. And it's a very funny little sketch of George Carlin about your rights and see how your rights are. And you find out that they're not rights, actually. They are temporary, whatever he calls them. You know what I mean? Anyway, because a right cannot be given and taken. the right is over there. But they just give you from time to time. No. All right, stay strong, stay smart, look for the truth, and be just, my friends.